The death of a loved one is always a very traumatic time in someone's life, and having to deal with the affairs of someone who has died can often add to the loss. So what exactly is probate, and what information do you need to know when someone close to you dies? Well, joining me to discuss this is Lorna McArdle, solicitor with Dillon Solicitors in Dublin 14. Lorna, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
First of all, just explain what probate is, because I know it can be very confusing for people when a relative dies and they're left with the estate and they come in and they're not sure exactly what to do or what probate means.
Yeah. So probate is the process which allows for the distribution of a deceased person's assets where they have a will. If they don't have a will, it's known as administration, but effectively it all surrounds the distributing of a person's assets.
So if a relative passes away, what do you need to do in order to deal with their assets?
So the first thing you need to do is establish whether or not they had a will and where the original will is kept. You'll need to establish who the executors are, and this will be stated in the will. You'll need to register the death, so that way a death certificate will issue, and you also need to make a list of all their assets and all their liabilities.
Okay, so if they do have a will, then what happens?
Well, a will is a little bit more straightforward because the will expresses their wishes. So it will say where they want their assets to go and who they want them to go to. At that point then, if the estate is valued at more than €23,000, a grant will need to be taken out. And if there's a will, this is known as a grant of probate.
What is an executor?
So the executor is the person appointed under the will to deal with the person's assets and to administer the estate after they die.
So how does a solicitor then interact with the executor?
Yeah, so the solicitor, I suppose, takes a lot of the work away from the executor. So we'll meet with the executor and we'll advise them what their duties are and what they need to do. Now, as a solicitor, we will kind of do a lot of what they are required to do. So we'll write to banks and, to the social welfare departments just to see what assets were in the bank accounts. If the social welfare has any claims against the estate, we'll write to all the beneficiaries and request their PPS numbers and see if they ever received any prior gifts or inheritances. We will make a return to the revenue and then we'll apply for the grant of probate on behalf of the executor.
What if the executor has already died themselves?
Well, if the executor has already died themselves, it's not a problem. There's just a few different things that need to be done along the way.
What if the deceased didn't have a will, which is quite common, I know, in
Yeah,
Ireland.
absolutely. Yeah, if the deceased didn't have a will, the process is known as administration, and the grant that's taken out is a grant of administration intestate, and it just means the next of kin takes the role of the executor.
And what if the next of kin can't act or doesn't want to act?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It is quite stressful. So a lot of the time the person may not want to do it and they can renounce, and then a next in line will take the position.
Okay, then finally, what happens after the grant issues?
So once the grant issues, it means that we can start taking in all the assets. So we send a copy to, the banks or wherever the assets were, and they go into what's called an executor's account. So it means we can take it in and then distribute the assets according to the will.
Okay, well, Lorna McArdle, many thanks for that advice.
You're very welcome.